Okay, we can go ahead and get this webinar started. My name is Kelsey McFarland. I'm the events manager here at RFPIO. Before I hand this over to our presenters for today's webinar, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees are in listen-only mode. If you run into any sort of technical issues or need any assistance, please utilize the chat box located at the bottom of your screen. Second, we will be opening it up to Q&A at the end of the session as time permits. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please utilize the Q&A panel to submit them. Third, the webinar is being recorded, so a copy will be sent out post-webinar to everybody who registered. Now I'm excited to hand this over to Andrew Stone to go ahead and kick us off and to dive in how Finastra was able to globally roll out RFPIO. Thanks so much for being here.
Hello everyone, my name is Andrew Stone, Senior Manager of Partnerships at RFPIO. During my time as a Customer Success Manager, I had the distinct privilege of onboarding the Finastra team during their implementation. At the time, the Finastra onboarding was one of the largest challenges we had taken up. With hundreds of users, dozens of active projects, and a global team hungry for best practices and expertise. We're excited to have the Finastra team with us today to share their experience. With that, I'll let the ladies introduce themselves.
Hello, my name is Joan Dolence, and I'm the Senior Proposal Architect at Finastra. I've been with Finastra since 2008. I have more than 20 years of experience in technical and professional communications, writing, editing, and managing content. And before coming to Finastra, I worked at universities, publishing companies, and other corporations. During my time at Finastra, I first worked as a senior technical writer, managing the documentation in support of one of our core banking systems, which enabled me to learn a lot about the needs of our clients. And it gave me the chance to collaborate cross-functionally within Finastra. I then moved into pre-sales, where I helped update our legacy database of RFP content. When Finastra started looking for a new RFP tool to help us scale our operations globally after the merger of Misys and D&H to create Finastra, Robin asked me to be involved in their evaluation of RFP tools and to join the team to take on management of the new tool. So now my main responsibility at Finastra is to serve as our in-house expert on RFPIO. I ensure that the tool is running smoothly and meeting the needs of our teams, and that Finastra is using RFPIO functionality to the fullest. Day to day, Robin and I collaborate closely to set strategy and best practices around using RFPIO for proposal operations. And over the past 2 years, we've spent a lot of time on what we're talking about today, which is rolling out RFPIO globally within Finastra. And with that, I'll hand it over to Robin to introduce herself.
Thanks, Joan. Hello, my name is Robin Quade, and I am the Senior Manager of Finastra's Proposal Center of Excellence. A little background on myself. I've spent the last 25 years of my career focused on the financial services industry, and I recently celebrated my 20th year with Finastra. In my customer-facing roles, I worked for nearly 5 years for Wells Fargo, which gave me the experience and background in retail banking necessary to bring forward into my roles with Finastra. From my vendor's point of view, I've assisted financial institutions based on a variety of roles, from regional sales manager, where I managed a base of nearly 60 core banking clients, to senior support and implementation specialist, where I supported our core banking clients on usage of system best practices, and I implemented enterprise core banking systems by strictly managing key implementation milestones. For the last 15 plus years with Finastra, I focused on supporting our clients and prospects in our sales support capacity. I was a proposal writer for 7 of those 15 years, where I actively responded to proposals, and I have spent the remaining time leading the proposal team, working closely with leadership to set company direction and strategy as it relates to proposal management. Now, Joan and I work very closely together to help define the strategy and rollout of RFPIO, but we don't do this alone. Our proposal team also includes 7 proposal analysts whose primary role is to manage the end-to-end proposal process. And we have 1 person dedicated to the centralized support of RFPIO operations. As we continue to stand up our global markets, the centralized support role is becoming increasingly more critical. Some of the responsibilities we're shifting to a centralized model include things such as project mapping, facilitation of the vendor section in projects, and day-to-day support of our RFPIO users through a centralized support mailbox.
In terms of our proposal volumes, During our last fiscal year, we processed nearly 200 projects inside RFPIO, which totaled over 57,000 questions. We fielded projects from 12 different lines of business, covering more than 30 different products. Project size and makeup vary from small follow-up questionnaires to RFPs with over 2,000 multi-part questions, totaling over 1,500 pages of response. Every quarter, we're onboarding new global lines of business into RFPIO, so our project volume from last year doesn't represent the full volume of projects received by the company. As we continue to scale RFPIO to all our lines of business, we anticipate doubling the number of projects we process in RFPIO.
So who is Finastra? Finastra is a privately held company owned by Vista Equity Partners and was formed in 2017 through the combination of two financial technology companies, Misys and D&H. The business of Finastra create a strong, unified global fintech company, making Finastra the third largest financial services company in the world. Finastra has more than 10,000 employees and over 8,600 customers over 130 countries, which includes 90 of the top 100 banks globally. We're headquartered out of London, with our North American headquarters in Toronto, Canada, and our US headquarters located in Lake Mary, Florida. Finastra believes the future of finance is open, meaning we're changing the way modern banking software is built and distributed. We offer an open developer platform that uses Microsoft Azure as the foundation technology. This enables us to champion collaboration and encourages innovation by opening our core systems so that third parties can develop applications on top. We serve financial institutions of all shapes and sizes in the areas of retail banking, payments, lending, corporate banking, and treasury and capital markets.
As we started to plan this webinar, we thought about our initial plans for rolling out RFPIO at Finastra. To be honest, initially we thought it would be pretty straightforward. We had a great new tool and we thought we'd implement all the lines of business at the same time. However, reality hit home pretty quickly. We are a small, mostly US-based proposal team, and we're working with many lines of business across the globe and hundreds of resources from two newly merged companies. We had 4 different knowledge bases and hundreds of other resource files floating around on people's PCs. So when we laid it all out, we realized that if we didn't take a step back and create a list of priorities and a clear implementation plan, our rollout could turn into the squiggly path you see at the bottom of the slide. And we wanted to avoid that path. So we took a step back and created an onboarding plan that is repeatable yet agile, a plan that could be applied to all the lines of business, but with some built-in flexibility to make changes and apply the lessons learned along the way.
Leveraging the repeatable foundation we created comes into our implementation process. First, we started by analyzing our priorities. Considering we were planning to roll out in areas of the business we had no prior experience, we quickly asked for the support of our leadership team, not only to set priorities, but to gain continual support and visibility into the project that would eventually filter down into the teams looking to onboard. We also created regular check-in meetings with the leadership, starting with weekly check-ins. On our own, Joan and I had mixed emotions on where to start. We had some teams proactively reaching out to say they were keen to implement the tool, but we didn't necessarily know if this was in line with the priorities of the company. So we use factors such as proposal volumes, the number of resources available to support the business, go-to-market sales priorities, and overall complexity and interdependency of products to prioritize which lines of business would roll out and in what order. We started with our North American community markets business as an early adopter because this is where we had the bulk of the team located, and it was also the business line we were most familiar in supporting. Our goal as a team was to form our best practices of how we wanted to use RFPIO so we could apply this forward in our future rollouts. Next, we created a couple of key project artifacts as tools to help us ensure that each onboarding would be following a repeatable structure. We created a project stakeholders guide that is sent out ahead of the formal onboarding to the key project stakeholders. The guide is made up of a variety of topics, including such topics as the typical onboarding team structure and what the expectations were of the team during the onboarding, an overview of the tagging structure within RFPIO, an overview on what good content looks like so that they knew what projects we could load into the answer library, what a benchmark project is, and what we were looking to achieve through processing such a project. And lastly, a diagram of the typical process workflow for an RFP. The guide's main goal is to set the framework of the onboarding ahead of the formal onboarding activities. So when we kick off the project, the team understands the basis of the milestones we intend to work through during the project. We also created an onboarding readiness template that lists the appointed stakeholders from the line of business and what roles they'll play during the onboarding. It also includes a list of key milestones and estimated durations that will be addressed during the project. We also included a spot on the slide to track status and milestone owners to be reviewed during each project status meeting. And as we loaded content into RFPIO, we would provide stats on the data loaded by the source of the project and the content tag if we had more than one product involved in the onboarding. When we're ready to start working with a line of business, we meet with the appointed line of business sponsor and owner to learn more about their needs. We introduce the stakeholder guide and onboarding readiness plan and review and customize the rollout milestones based on what we need to learn about the line of business during that first meeting. We go over the guidelines for good content, which are laid out in the stakeholders guide, and we request the line of business provide us their best content for loading. We stress the importance of more not always being better, and we ask them to focus on the rules of providing us the most up-to-date and repeatable content and to avoid any content that's unique to one prospect. We also obtain a list of project members so that we can schedule a team kickoff and training session and establish a regular cadence for meetings based on the various regions and time zones of the resources. Being agile during this process is so important. When we started in the Americas with a business line we already knew, we didn't have so much to figure out. But as we scaled our work with teams we didn't know all over the globe, we realized that one size doesn't always work. We also realized that Joan and I, being the two key resources sitting in the middle of the United States, would have to make accommodations at times to work with time zones all around the globe. We recruited the support of a few resources on the team located in the APAC region to help support our implementation in areas such as Singapore and Australia, with time differences as big as 12 to 17 hours. And we created a 15-minute workflow training video that could be used as a self-training tool for those users that couldn't attend the regular training sessions. As we start working through milestones, we rely heavily on our line of business sponsor and owner to help us set and guide the milestone timing so it works with the availability of the project team and the needs of the business line. For example, we have a number of business lines that have different resource teams in different regions, such as the Americas, Europe, Middle East and Africa, and APAC. And depending on the data needs of the team, we find that we might need to load a subset of data to capture the unique regulatory and processing requirements of each region. When we set training timelines and expectations for the benchmark project, we also work with the line of business leads to decide if a big bang approach works for the team or if it makes business or timing sense to break up the training and work the project by region. In every project, we require the onboarding team to process what's called a benchmark project. The rules of the benchmark are fairly simple. We're looking for a project or combination of projects that has not been used to seed the answer library and is made up of good sampling of questions they would see in a typical RFP. Processing a benchmark allows us to monitor the team's usability of the tool and to also gauge the quality, depth, and usability of data. We take the outcomes of the project metrics and review them with key project stakeholders to determine if we need to offer additional training, such as searching or applying filters in the answer library. We also use the results to identify if there are any gaps in data and identify any opportunities to add or enrich the data set before we go into live production. All lessons we learned during this onboarding process are applied forward to future onboardings. We also make refinements to any of the project artifacts, such as the stakeholder guide and onboarding readiness guide.
One of the ways we promoted Successful RFPIO onboarding at Finastra is to capture and share the positive buzz about RFPIO we've heard from teams that are using the tool, and in particular, communicating that information to Finastra leadership. And because we had the support and buy-in from leadership, we were given opportunities to speak about our progress with RFPIO during our regular team calls and to promote the success of our onboardings. We've also worked hard to capture and promote the buzz throughout the company. We used Yammer to call out when a new team went live on RFPIO. And when we received positive feedback from RFPIO users, we shared those messages with our sales support team to promote the efficiency of using RFPIO. And as more users came into the system, unsolicited word of mouth started to spread. People reached out to us saying that they heard we had this great new RFP tool and they're wondering how they can use it too. When people hear about lines of business that have had a positive onboarding experience and are saving time with RFPIO, they want in. When we reflect on what we wish we knew back when we started our onboardings, the biggest lesson is that it's really important to have a structured onboarding plan based on best practices. Start with that. And then if we need to make adjustments for a team, we can, but only after they've tried the tool first. For example, tagging. We use collections within RFPIO, and everyone within the organization shares the same tags. But every business line that we onboard wants their own unique set of tags. With our first onboardings, we tried to accommodate everyone's unique needs by using custom fields to essentially allow for sub-tagging. But we quickly realized that after taking the time to set up this structure, the teams weren't even using the custom fields. And as users got more familiar with searching and filtering in RFPIO, they could easily find the right content without those custom fields. This was a huge takeaway for us, and we now advocate to new groups to give our simple tagging structure a try, and then come back to us if they feel that it's not meeting their needs. Another example of less is not necessarily more is the amount of content we load into the answer library to seed the database for a team. After many hours of unnecessary data prep, we are now very firm in our RFP data guidelines as we kick off a new onboarding. We don't need to import their 10 best RFPs in full. We just need their best content. We advocate starting small and adding content as we identify gaps versus bloating the database and trying to pare down the noise later. We've learned that people will not take the time to go back and clean up the data after they're using RFPIO. So we ask the lines of business to give the foundation data we've loaded a try. If they find gaps, we can adjust after they've started using that content. This is something we've preached to our new groups coming into the tool. And in both cases, in trying to accommodate what our lines of business thought they wanted, we found that these strategies weren't yielding the best results, and we adjusted. As we've become more confident in our onboardings and applying the lessons learned, we found that we can be more thoughtful and deliberate about the adjustments we make. As the proposal experts and RFPIO experts, we can approach the lines of business with our best practice recommendations and insist that they try them first before we adjust the plan. When we think about the factors for success in onboarding, first and foremost, gaining leadership sponsors is key. Leadership helped us to prioritize which lines of business to work with first and identify the key stakeholders that could help us to lead the onboardings. Leadership also did a great job of promoting RFPIO through the ranks and emphasizing the importance of RFPIO as part of their strategic plan. Second, we tried to define and apply best practices to the onboardings, so we had a repeatable and predictable process. We also focused on leveraging the skills and expertise of our team members. The entire RFP team helped to define our best practices, create training tools, and assist with the onboardings. Robin drew from her more than 15 years of proposal processing experience, and I learned everything I could about using RFPIO. Another key was learning from every single onboarding and then applying those lessons learned to future onboardings. We solicit feedback from our teams so we can hear about what went well and where we can improve, both in the onboarding experience and in their use of RFPIO after onboarding. And we've always had amazing customer care from RFPIO. If there was something we wanted to do with the tool, they were there to support us, whether through system enhancements or walking us through how to use the existing functionality. RFPIO has never let us down. And finally, we really enjoy working together. We love using RFPIO, and it's fun to bring this tool to our teams. Looking forward to what's next for us. RFPIO is so feature rich that even after we onboard our lines of business into the tool, we're always looking for new functionality and untapped features that we can roll out to our users. For example, right now we're implementing the language translation pack to help with a partner rollout in Latin America. And we're looking at other parts of our business that could benefit from this feature. And with 275 RFPIO users and growing, another one of our major initiatives is expanding our self-help tools and creating best practices around a support model that includes both customized Finastra support and links to RFPIO's extensive Zendesk help. And finally, we plan to continue to engage groups and partners to leverage RFPIO.
So if there are 3 things I would like you to take away from today's session, they are: first, apply a structure to your onboarding and be willing to be agile and always apply what you've learned forward. Next, gain buy-in from leadership. This for us was huge, and it was one of our biggest keys to success in this whole process. And lastly, listen to your users. Don't wait for them to come to you. Ask. For example, one of the ways we proactively solicit feedback from users is through scheduled check-in meetings following the teams go live. We ask for questions or topics in advance of the call, but we leave enough time for users to ask their own questions. We also recently launched e-surveys to target groups of users. The survey is quick and simple and focuses on things such as: how easy is it to find relevant content in the answer library? How easy do they find it to track project status or communicate with their project team in RFPIO? What do they think would be useful to add to RFPIO to help them? And lastly, would they be interested in additional training on the tool? We received some great feedback on our last surveys, and we now have a targeted list of advanced training topics to roll out to our users. So with that, we want to thank you for your time today. Both Joan and I love sharing our enthusiasm for RFPIO, and we're really excited to share how we've deployed the tool across our global organization.
Thank you so much, Joan and Robin. That was a wonderful presentation. So many great insights. As you were speaking about some of the highlights, I was reminded of several items that you brought up and mentioned. So I really appreciate your knowledge and sharing that. We are going to transition now to live Q&A. So in the bottom of your Zoom webinar, you can feel free to go ahead and submit your questions to us. I'll be asking those live to both Joan and Robin. Joan, Robin, we got one question in already. The first one is, do you guys leverage the RFPIO answer library as a knowledge base? And if so, what lessons have you learned?
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, this is Joan. I can take that question. We do leverage the answer library as a knowledge base. When we first started using RFPIO, we actually created a best practice document, which we kept in the document library, but it was really hard to keep that up to date. So we've done a few different things. We tried using Teams kind of outside of RFPIO for our own team knowledge base, but we finally decided, you know what, let's use the answer library, because when you're working in RFPIO, you already know how to search using RFPIO. The answer library would be the best place for that. So we have a collection that is a kind of a Finastra self-help collection. We started by putting in the kind of the 50 most frequently asked questions, or things that people ask us over and over, or that we ask each other, and created article or question and answer pairs for that. Right now, we are developing kind of a mapping guide. So we've started putting in mapping Q&As and, giving, attaching owners to those, review cycles. So we're using RFPIO for our own help, as well as, using it as a knowledge base for our products that we support. So I'm hoping that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. Robin, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think Joan did a pretty good job of summing that up. I don't have anything to add.
Absolutely. Well, I'll add there a few comments there. No, I think you guys do a fantastic job of leveraging it as a knowledge base. And from my experience as well, it's not just leveraged in-app, but I know a lot of folks have taken advantage of lookup, whether that's for the Chrome extension or for those who've had the pleasure of testing our beta version of lookup in the Microsoft Office suite. So I know that the use case of a living knowledge base has been taken advantage of, not only in-app, but also through some of our add-ons as well. We got a great question that came in just a moment ago, and it's all around keeping your team engaged and excited. So do you guys have any tips or tricks for keeping your team engaged and excited during the implementation process?
Yeah, so Andrew, this is Robin. I'll talk a little bit about that. I think going back to the elements of just getting your key leadership involved, we have two parts of our business that we kind of split into North America and rest of world markets. And really just getting them on board and having them filter down to their teams that this is a major company initiative was huge in helping us to promote the tool. Once we actually got a few successes out of the tool, people really started, like Joan said, unsolicited feedback coming back to us saying, we want in, when are we able to onboard, when can we use it? We've heard this is cool. We have groups that are not even doing RFPs that have reached out saying, how can we use it for our group? So we really haven't had to pull people along more than we've had to temper enthusiasm, if that makes any sense, because quite early on, we really articulated what RFPIO meant in the overall strategy for Finastra. So once people started seeing some success with the tool and spreading word of mouth, it just naturally grew. And so we oftentimes have people that are interested in using the tool versus us trying to pull them along. And Joan, I don't know if you have anything to add to that as well.
Yeah, I'll add one other thing. As we get more and more people into RFPIO, there's always somebody who will be like, well, can I just fill out my answers in Excel and email them to you, that kind of thing. But as more and more people get into RFPIO, that becomes hard for the rest of the team, right? To have to copy answers into RFPIO. And so I think it becomes easier as more people use it to get everybody in the same workspace and communicating using all the features in RFPIO, the comments and the at mentions and, the activities within a project. And so the momentum builds, I guess, is that's what I'm kind of getting at, is that as more and more people come in, other people see the benefit and the time savings and the efficiency for the entire team of them getting on board. Because if they're the only ones who don't want to use it on a team, that's a lot harder for the rest of your team members. So so that's another piece of it, and that's, I think, grown as we've added more and more users into the tool, where everybody's using it. And so when everybody's using it, it's easier for those people who maybe aren't initially excited to get on board. And also, we had a slide about the buzz. It really is true that word of mouth spreads. And when one person hears that somebody was able to do something really cool in RFPIO, they get a lot more interested in checking it out and seeing what this tool has to offer. I think that's what I'd say about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I know being on the CSM front and just my experience with whether it's speaking with customers directly or at the user conference, the idea of creating like experienced value to gain momentum and excitement around, it doesn't matter if it's RFPIO or another tool, is always something that people are trying to figure out how to kind of crack that nut. And so I know you guys have done a fantastic job with that across the organization. And it's exciting to hear some of those things you guys have done. Our next question is kind of centered around the idea of communication across multiple regions. So we have a couple questions that kind of came in under this topic, but how do you guys manage the implementation kind of cross-culturally across multiple regions? Do you have any wisdom or insight there?
I can take this. Well, first of all, I've seen a question about the best way to communicate to all of our RFPIO users, and we use single sign-on, and we add when somebody comes into RFPIO, we add them into an Outlook group. So we have it's easy to send something to that entire list of people. So that part's not difficult. I think we also use within a project, there's the ability to send a message to an entire project team. Also on the back end of RFPIO, when you add users, you can add tags. So we use tags to identify groups of users. So maybe we have a payments, all the payments users, all the people in the payments group who use RFPIO, we put a tag on those users. So we can export a list of just the payments users and communicate to them. And Robin mentioned we've been sending out surveys to users to get feedback about using RFPIO. And the way we're doing that is we're targeting several groups at a time for each survey. So we can create a list of those users, export it from RFPIO using the tags on their user profile on the back end of RFPIO, and then communicating with them that way. So that's actually a really great way to get a good list of specific users. We also have tags for like our leadership users. So if we want to send a message just to those leaders, we can export that list from RFPIO and communicate that way as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A thought, Joan, that I had on that was, and it kind of goes in line with communicating with your user base, but how do you guys solicit feedback from the global team about RFPIO? Maybe it's feedback, maybe it's process. Do you guys have a formalized way of doing that?
So we recently, like we'd mentioned before, we recently started sending out e-surveys, but I mean, honestly, during the onboarding process, we're working very closely with our key stakeholders. So we appoint a line of business sponsor, and then also a line of business owner that basically is in charge of kind of keeping the resources on project on task. So we're heavily communicating with the teams during that onboarding process. We have regularly weekly check-ins, even if it is in a completely different time zone. We're creating a time that is mutually agreeable to everybody on the team, communicating those key points. And then we're also having side meetings as necessary with the key line of business owner and sponsor, just to make sure that, we're getting the right information for that line of business. We're communicating back any challenges and problem solving along the way. Soliciting feedback, the surveys is a good anonymous way for people to give us candid feedback. But we've had a lot of users that they'll just send us a quick Teams message. Just want to let you know, I had a quick turnaround RFP. I got it done in less than a day. I would have never been able to do this without the tool. Those are like things that are just proactively coming to us. And we're hearing a lot more of that. Or if people have a specific success with a project, like we had a team that had to turn around a project within 24 hours, and they shouted out to us saying, there's no possible way they could have done this without having the, in-tool collaboration, being able to work on the document at the same time. So most of the positive feedback comes to us unsolicited, or it comes through a survey, but we are checking in with key stakeholders in the various groups at different periods of time, just to make sure that, we don't have anything that's going on that we're not aware of.
I'll add one other
Totally.
thing there, Andrew. We recently, Robin mentioned that one of our big initiatives is to set up a sort of a centralized support model for RFPIO. As we get more and more users, when we onboard people into RFPIO, they get to know me and Robin, they know our names, and so they tend to come back to us. But we can't always handle the volume of questions and things that people have. So we've set up a centralized support mailbox. It's RFPIO support at Finastra, so that anytime, anytime somebody has a question about using RFPIO, they can shoot it to that inbox. We've got several people monitoring it. Anyone can pick it up and answer it. We're using that mailbox also for requests for mapping help or any kind of help that people need. So we're really trying to set up a structure so that people feel supported around the globe at any time with any RFPIO at Finastra question that they have.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And it also kind of, as you're sharing that, it also helps kind of bring full circle the idea of buzz and creating excitement, right? So if there's a constant dialogue between your users and the idea of the application where you're receiving that positive feedback or maybe correcting some of the negative feedback, it kind of almost self-generates that positive buzz, which is super exciting. I love that you guys do that. We have a couple of questions around the answer library and around functionality as well. So another great question, we'll start with the functionality question, is do you guys leverage business units in addition to collections? Why or why not?
I can take this one. We do not use business units right now. However, that doesn't mean that we won't use it in the future. The why not is kind of, we just haven't gotten there yet. But it's funny because I was just having a conversation about this earlier today about, as we onboard new teams in different, and use the language pack in different languages, business units might be the way to go for us. We just haven't implemented that yet. So not to say we won't, but I don't know, anything to add there, Robin?
No, I think it probably was one of those things at the very beginning. We didn't even use collections. We really just had all of the content sitting in one area. And then we had a user that basically had expressed concern of wanting to wall off their content because it was a smaller unit that had a small amount of people that were really going to be needing the data and just wanting to restrict maybe some edit rights as well. So that's where we started exploring collections, and it really has helped us in our global onboardings because there's logical lines of business that products will work in tandem together. And then there's other lines of business that really have no reason to ever look at that content. So the collections worked for us, but like Joan said, we really probably just haven't got to the point of exploring the business unit concept fully yet to see if it would work better for us or if collections is really the way to go.
Yeah. Well, I also think it's worth pointing out too, especially from the RFPIO side of things, you guys came on fairly early, in kind of our tenure as a solution. For all intents and purposes, we're still kind of in startup mode. And I think business units wasn't even available when you guys signed up. And it just kind of speaks to that idea that RFPIO as an organization, as a technology, as we try to continue to look to innovate in our space, there's constantly new features coming on board. And I think the good news about that is we always want to be an organization that scales along with our companies, right? And so this is a great example of one of those things that might not have been available as you guys were kind of beginning in the beginning stages of your content management strategy and your implementation strategy, but now it might provide some really nice benefit, in the years ahead. And so I think it speaks to this idea that, you kind of always have to be flexible and kind of take inventory of what's available for within the tool and maybe what's coming, and kind of shift and change your strategy and approach as you scale and as you move along that maturity model. All right. The next question is kind of all around content managers, and I'm assuming this is in the answer library, but it could also be looked at from the project, active project level as well. But the question is, do you guys have dedicated content managers?
I can grab this one. You're kind of looking at her right now. Right now, I'm pretty much the main content manager. However, this is an area where we have evolved as we've used RFPIO. So when we first got into RFPIO, we weren't super worried about content ownership, and we kind of the RFP team, our small team, kind of was owning the content, managing it. Well, as we've gotten more and more users, more and more business lines, we definitely see the need to have dedicated content managers. Right now, what we have though is a real push to when we onboard a team to preach the idea that anything that you put into RFPIO, QAs, things in the document library need to be owned, and they need to be on a review cadence so that our content isn't just sitting out there getting stale. And we also look at whether content is not being used. So if the use count is 0 and it's been sitting out there for a year and a half, we look at that content. But right now we are trying to make sure that our SMEs are owning the content, that content has review cycles attached to it, and that we're keeping eyes on the content continuously. We have a lot of content in RFPIO, so right now, we have nowhere near all of it owned, but it's one of those initiatives that we really, I'd say over the past, 9 months or so, 9 months to a year, realized that we really need to be on top of this so that our content stays fresh and useful, updated, and is meeting the needs of our teams. Otherwise, we've got a whole, what we don't want to have is a whole bunch of content sitting out there that nobody's using, or that's wrong, or, just old and outdated. So we're heading towards content managers. Right now, we're using our SMEs heavily to own and review content. And our RFP team, our small team, is kind of keeping an eye on all of it from a management standpoint. Anything to add there, Robin?
Yeah, actually, right now, Joan really is kind of the person that's making sure that we've got content being pushed through moderation, that we are pushing for content ownership. We do actually have 2 positions open right now in the US that we're looking for people that are going to specifically be content editors. So we have recognized a need to have more dedication to maintaining the content. But I think pushing content ownership has been a huge initiative for us, making sure that lines of business give us the right people to go to be able to vet out that content, make sure that it's still up to date. We're talking a lot about different review cycles so that it doesn't become a laborious task throughout the year. So like what content needs to be reviewed more timely than others. And so far we are not meeting resistance when we're having that conversation. It really still is just a matter of getting that subject matter expert time to be able to do that. But we are going through other strategies, like Joan said, about like looking at what content hasn't been used and really deciding if that stuff could be purged off the system if it hasn't been used in a period of time, so that we're not maintaining all of that content for nothing. It also goes back to our onboardings. We were loading everything but the kitchen sink at the beginning because people were just giving us RFPs. Now we're really being very strict to say we don't need 10 RFPs. We need your best content, and we're trying to pare that down at the very beginning.
Yeah. And I think a lot of folks can relate to this idea that, it's just 1 or 2 people in charge of the whole effort, right? And the urgency and maybe the the stress for understanding recommendations around content owners and review cadences. Joan or Robin, would you guys mind just sharing real quick kind of what some of your review cadences look like? Is that every month? Is that every 6 months?
Our default cadence, so what we set on the back end is 12 months. However, anything that is related to roadmap or tied to we know that it's tied to an upcoming release, we set a much more aggressive timeline for review on that. So it might be like 3 months, 6 months, something like that. We also set a more aggressive timeline on some of the, due diligence related content. So if we know that we're going to be making a change or there's a regulatory change coming out, we set those to be much quicker. One area that we talk a lot about, we haven't quite figured out is that content that really doesn't change very often at all. So right now 12 months is the longest period that we go between reviews, but is it appropriate for some of that content to go a little bit longer to free up SME's time to look at the stuff that is maybe more important? So that's kind of what we're looking at right now for review cadence.
Excellent. No, and I think that gives a lot of our user base some really great insight into kind of how they should be thinking about review cadences. I know we get a lot of questions about that during onboarding, so I know that's probably helpful for a lot of folks. All right, sticking on the topic of features and functionality, I got a question here around integrations, and it says, are you making use of any integrations from RFPIO? And I think this maybe could also be stated kind of in a different way too. Are you currently using any integrations, or maybe are there any add-ons integrations you would like to have or wish you took advantage of? Maybe you can answer it in both of those kind of forms, Joan and Robin.
Well, we have a lot of wish list items. We have purchased the Salesforce integration. However, Finastra, being a merger of two very large companies, has went through a very long cycle of getting all of our different business units onto the same version of Salesforce. And that has not been an easy activity. So we have not yet implemented that Salesforce integration, but that is a big part of our plan. We've actually really talked to leadership about how that could really streamline the way that we're bringing in projects from other groups, because right now that's still a little bit of a jumbling to have one line of business that sends us projects one way, another person sending it direct to Joan. So I think Salesforce would really help to get everybody going into the right direction. It would also help us to promote a lot of the metrics that maybe our sales staff isn't seeing today. So that is definitely one that we're excited to implement. We're also looking at implementing the Microsoft Teams integration at some point. We haven't quite got to the point of our IT implementation of that yet, but that is something that we've expressed interest in. We did purchase the Chrome lookup tool, which I think is now extended to the Office suite, if I'm not mistaken, to really allow users access that are not maybe power users of RFPIO still have access to that knowledge in the knowledge base. And then we do use the SAML integration for single sign-on. Joan, did I miss any that we were using or not looking at implementing in the future?
No, I think you caught them all.
I mean, there's always lots of things that we talk to Andrew about, and always have our eye on things. But like Joan had mentioned in our presentation, the tool is so feature rich, so we really have to prioritize getting our lines of business stood up, and then what extra pieces of functionality to kind of help that driving efficiency results, or different integrations that we're going to implement. So I think once we get done with our onboardings this fiscal year, which runs till the end of May, I think there's going to be a lot more activity on the integration front and a lot of the extras that RFPIO has to offer.
Yeah. No, and one of the things I really appreciate about you guys as an organization, you guys are constantly looking for what's new and how you guys can do it better. And I know from just a CSM front or an account management front, any of our CSMs or account managers welcome the conversation when folks reach out and say, hey, what new integrations do you guys have? How can we do this better? What, am I missing something? What am I missing out on? And you guys have done that at just about every corner. And I just, from the bottom of my heart, I really appreciate that. It just makes you guys, such an amazing team to work with. So thank you guys so much for that heart and that attitude. You guys do such a great job. All right, last but not least, we have time for one more kind of question. And I want to kind of take us kind of almost full circle around KPIs and performance metrics. So we had a really fantastic question that was asked around how are you guys measuring success, right? What performance metrics do you guys have in place? What does that look like for you?
Well, right now, we really just are looking for an increase in efficiency. We've started to quantify that on a time basis in some of our North American markets that we're very intimately familiar with. For example, we have a lot of consultant-based RFPs in the US where we're taking 3 to 5 days to complete a pre-fill of a project that we're now doing in 2 to 3 hours with RFPIO using the auto respond functionality. So we've been able to quantify at specific project levels some really good efficiency. I would like to see things brought together in the future in terms of tracking it through the different sales stages. But right now, with us not being completely integrated with Salesforce, I think that might be a little bit more work than we have bandwidth to track, but that is an evolutionary goal for us once we integrate with Salesforce to start tracking the RFP or the RFI through the sales stage process to make sure that we're making it to that next level. Because to me, if the RFP can propel you to that demo stage or the next stage in the sales process, to me, that is success. We are using the executive dashboard on a quarterly basis to report on all of our lines of business. I've got different fields that I've set up so that I can segregate out our North American markets versus our global markets. We have everything tiered out by line of business on the intake form. We can definitely split out different products, different lines of business. So we're doing a lot of measuring there. We were starting to look at some of the answer library usage, but we're realizing with some of our global markets really being heavily on the scoring side, we weren't getting the true metrics out of there. So we're trying to find other ways to quantify efficiencies other than people telling us that, oh, this would have taken us this amount longer. We're starting to get into the more detailed time tracking and trying to compare that for, project over project, quarter over quarter, month over month, that type of thing.
Excellent. Joan, anything to add to that?
No, I was gonna mention looking at the answer library, use statistics and things, but Robin slipped that in at the end, so she took the words right out of my mouth.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you both for your time and expertise. Like I said, it's been an absolute pleasure working with you guys. And I know we truly value the relationship with Finastra, and we're excited for the season ahead. So thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your insight with the rest of our users in our companies. And we just thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Right.
Andrew, Joan, and Robin, I really appreciate you guys for taking the time and fielding so many questions out there. I see there's a few that weren't answered, and so we definitely have the opportunity to follow up. As Andrew mentioned, it's really important to be able to reach out to your account manager just to hear what's coming new. So in the follow-up link, you guys will actually have the opportunity to email your account manager, so be sure to check on that. You'll also get a copy of the recording of the webinar with all the questions included in it too for your records. So thank you guys again for spending your Thursday morning or afternoon with us. I really hope you guys have a great time. Thank you so much. Have a great day.